Perfect. And we'll just,
Recording in progress.
all right, call it back to order at 8:40. We're on to 9B, which was moved from consent agenda, which is the sign ordinance updates. I'm trying to think best way to go over this since Natalie and Kendra aren't here.
Natalie is on the line,
Okay.
and I did give her a heads up that we might be discussing it, so.
Yeah, Natalie, if maybe you could just give a brief overview of what some of the changes are and kind of where, how we got to here.
She has not unmuted herself, but I can
Oh, shoot.
either try to give an overview or I'm try texting her. Yeah, there's the. Oh, thank you. Really, yes. So in August of 26, in August we looked at changing the real estate signs portion of the city code and amending it to have the construction sign piece, which allows for those construction
I'm sorry,
rules.
Jessica, I'm getting a text that there's no sound on the internet
No.
for people, so
Hello. Okay, perfect. Can people now, hopefully people now can hear us?
Text Jeremy and
Thank you, appreciate that. So really in August, we looked at making the change to construction signs to allow for those signs that have the construction rules as well as a construction, or as well as the sign letting folks know that a development is there. So it would be the allowing of 2 signs, I believe. Oh, now she is online. Natalie, you want to take over? I'm not doing a great job on the fly.
No, I'm sorry, I just couldn't hear you guys. I wasn't sure if you were back. But yes, so basically August 26th, there was a discussion about the sign ordinance and the portion about construction signs. Staff was directed to proceed with a drafted ordinance update. So this item is doing specifically that. There is not much change to the ordinance language. It would allow for 2 construction signs at construction sites for a longer period of time. Until 90% of building permits are issued for residential development, and until a certificate of occupancy has been issued for a commercial or industrial development. One change that we decided to propose along with this is removing a definition for real estate sign. That term of art is not used anywhere else in the code, and we think that could be confusing if a construction sign happens to also advertise lots for sale. And it wouldn't change how we currently treat typical real estate signs that do fall under that definition. So basically, the ordinance and resolution in the packet need a simple majority to pass, and a summary ordinance does need that 4/5 majority.
Perfect, thank you, Natalie. The reason I pulled this for kind of some further conversation, and maybe this is more directed at John than it is at Natalie, or either of you feel free to jump in here, but there's a few particular things that I found when doing a little research. I found a League of Minnesota Cities memo kind of on some best practices with sign ordinances, and when you're drafting them. Couple items that I just don't see in ours that wanted to get your take on was, first one was including a substitution clause, which basically would specifically permit anywhere that a commercial sign is allowable, a non-commercial sign is allowable. And kind of for along First Amendment reasoning is why that exists and is recommended. Second thing was having some sort of defined period or timeline or process for the permitting requirement, which we'd be adding in 2C. I don't know if that's something we want to spell out specifically in the ordinance. That seemed to be the recommendation from League of Minnesota Cities. And then third kind of ties in with that first point I had about the substitution clause and the previous conversation we had on council about kind of sign ordinance adjacent with the sign policy, particularly with campaign signs and other signs, I guess, like that. And the 15 feet off the side of the road requirement that we have as our policy currently. So if you take a look at like 1G in our current ordinance, this isn't even a change, this is just existing language. It seems to say that we would allow a business sign either within 10 feet of the primary entrance or on the right-of-way in front of the property. So that would be an instance where we would be allowing a commercial sign where we would not be allowing a non-commercial sign, in my understanding of it. And that's just kind of an example of some of the concerns I have with what our policy is on that. Yeah, I just kind of want to open that up for discussion with you guys.
Yeah, I agree. When we discussed it last time, we kind of wrestled between three sides of a triangle. We've got freedom of speech issues. We've got to let people have a venue to speak their minds. We've got a public safety concern. We don't want to allow signs in places where it makes traffic unsafe. And then people's perceptions of what's attractive, I think, was the third leg of that stool. My reading of this, I wasn't aware of the substitution clause point, but I was going to point out that we're allowing signs in the right-of-way in some cases, but not in others as a conflict. But the way you're casting the issue, the league is saying we should do it, I think makes sense, that we would allow it. And so we're not treating them differently based upon their content or their seasonality, makes sense to me.
And John, are you familiar with what I'm talking about with that substitution clause?
Yeah, right. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. You're correct that our obligation for any kind of side ordinance, particularly in light of the Reed versus Town of Gilbert case, is to keep things as content neutral as we can. And so you're right. General way of thinking of that is if you have to look at the sign and read it to know what kind of sign it is, then you're not content neutral, right? I'm noticing that under the section you just referenced under G, we're talking about the type of sign. It looks like it's sandwich board and A-frame signs as opposed to commercial or any kind of content. I think that's permissible, the type of sign, so you could differentiate, for example, between electronic and static signs. What you can't do is say you have things. I think you might, both you and Councilmember Nichols are concerned about the issue at the right of way. We can certainly have a discussion about that, about whether you want that to be moved out, and I think it makes sense to have it aligned with policy. Gotcha. But yeah, I think at least my reading of G, I think that's defensible as a type of sign as opposed to a content on this.
Gotcha. That's good to know. But I would agree with kind of what you mentioned about maybe other instances where that is allowed or happening, and making sure that that is aligned with the policy, not in the ordinance. I just have some concerns about how that's not fully lining up, I think.
Mm-hmm. Well, it seems like it's the only place where we have a specific distance requirement.
Right.
We don't see that elsewhere here. So if we wanted to be consistent, then we should require all of these signs to be 15 feet away as well, or change the policy.
Yeah.
Mr. Mayor, if I may, the other thing to keep in mind too is you can differentiate between the statutory period that's allowed for basically lift sign restrictions during election years and things like that. So you get some leeway there. But I do agree that it's important to have clarity on the use of the right of way, because that can be a public safety versus aesthetics and things like that. So.
Right. And I think that's an important thing to bring up is I forget the term that is used for, but basically the lifting of those restrictions at the 46-day window prior to an election and 10 days after or something like that, where it's more free reign for that limited period. So yeah, I guess I just want to get some feedback on where we are with that policy. In terms of, John, you clarified my one concern with the actual ordinance itself. I'm trying to think of the other. How about the period of time for the permitting process, defining that. Do you think that's something we should include?
And then I guess I'm not specifically familiar with what you're referring to there. Are you talking about a time by which the city has to process a permit?
Yeah, it was, trying to remember exactly how it was worded. Basically suggested that it's good practice to spell out some of the specifics if you're going to be permitting signs, on how that process would work and, generally what the period of review is for the city or something like that.
Yeah, if you want to see something like that, we can certainly bring it back with some language.
Okay. What do you guys think of that?
I like it.
I have no opinion.
I, chewing on this for a while, I'd really like to stay 15 feet off.
Okay.
And the biggest thing when I was watching from the other side of the bench here, I was worried about anyone putting out election signs. If we were to go to 5 feet, I'd be more concerned of them getting hit by a car at that point, at least amount of time along tight to the roads and stuff. That 15 foot, there's a safety
Gotcha.
situation there for the person putting the sign out also. I just,
Gotcha.
otherwise it,
My other concern with the policy is, and I just tried to drive around and find some examples of it. I feel like that, if you go down 116 or potentially on Hackamore, just certain different areas of town that I've noticed where you don't necessarily, it's not so much a right-of-way issue, but if you're going 15 feet off the corner of the road and you have a big tree line 8 feet in on your property or 10 feet in your property, that's basically saying you can't express.
it's a place you can't put a sign.
What's that?
It's a place you wouldn't be able to put a sign.
Right.
Bad choice, obstruction of view, so.
But I think we need to account for that in the way we set the policy, because there are, like, the first leg of that stool is freedom of speech, so everybody's got to have an
Exactly.
opportunity.
Yeah, that's my concern, I guess. But I think we've got some varying opinions.
Again,
Council, for
too, I think I've said it, the timing on the, like, the election signs, I want them down 24 hours after the election date.
Yeah,
Instead of
and
going
I would agree
beyond
with
that.
that wholeheartedly, but I don't think we can.
I don't believe
that's a
we
state
can
law.
under
Yeah.
state statute.
You got to follow the.
Yeah, it would be nice if we could, and I'd support that.
At one point, we had that kind of in a previous city, so I don't know if that's gone now or not, but.
Yeah, I'm not sure when the 46 and 10-day window became a thing. Maybe it was prior to that.
Yeah, I'm not positive, but they've protected that pretty fiercely
Yeah.
over the years.
'Kay.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay, well, regarding the ordinance itself, where are we on, are we comfortable with the language? Are we wanting to send it to staff to make a couple changes regarding the permitting, kind of spelling that out more, and the substitution clause potentially?
Yeah, I think treating all the signs equally is a good policy. I'll float the idea of 7 feet, so people don't get too close, but also if people
Also.
have, a tree line or, if you've got a small yard, there's a lot of people in town who might not have the space for a sign at 15 feet where it's visible, depending on how their property is laid out.
Yeah, I would support that 100%. Again, that's more the adjacent policy than the ordinance, but let's tackle this and then discuss that.
Okay.
I would go ahead and make a motion to direct staff to follow up with a couple of those changes, particularly the substitution and permitting, and just bring it back to us with those additions.
Mr. Mayor, if I may.
Yeah.
Just one point of clarification for the language in G, which was not, I don't believe, subject to this review as far as just adding a construction sign.
Yep.
Is there intended language, intended distance you're anticipating? Would we be deleting?
No, I think your clarification on G, based on the type of sign, I think that gets rid of my concern with that one
Mr. Mayor?
specifically, I think.
So there is an implicit factor in G, in that it specifically mentions businesses. That maybe we need to clarify. Like, if you wanted to have an A-frame sign in your yard, that would be allowed in the right-of-way, right? Or is that prohibited? Can we rewrite this to make it not business-specific?
I think that substitution would make it so the signs themselves wouldn't have to be business-specific, but I don't know if make it into a zoning issue.
Yeah.
We can certainly substitute the word principal structure or something like that for the business, and that probably gets at what Councilor Nichols is driving at. But I guess my question, I apologize, I didn't articulate it very well, but there's concern about, we're talking about 10 feet of from the primary entrance and then, or on the right-of-way in front of the property. Are we looking to remove anything that would be in the right-of-way? Are we pulling it back a certain distance in uniformity? Is there a standard that I should relay as we look at this?
As it is, this would allow you to put it right up against the road. So if we feel there's value from a safety and aesthetics perspective in not allowing that, we should make it consistent. So that's where I would throw the 7-foot number out for discussion. See if anybody strongly advocates something different.
I think Alan would, I'm only gonna speak for Alan this one time. He had an issue with the distance, but he's not here, so.
Well, I
He'll
think
get a
this-
chance to vote on it too. This is
Yeah.
just drafting, so.
And that's kind of it's related to, I think, what Alan's concerns were, but somewhat the opposite of considering this is currently allowing it on the right-of-way line, or right on the right-of-way, as opposed to our policy for the other signs that are 15 feet off, and we're talking about reducing it. This would be increasing it to meet somewhere. So yeah, I would be comfortable with that 7-foot number for that. So changing G to 7 feet off of the right away, looking at adding that substitution clause and defining the permitting process.
And changing it to principal structure instead of business?
Was that,
That
Okay.
was John's suggestion. and
Yeah,
if we
then-
wanted to-
I will withdraw my motion and remake my motion with those 4 changes, if that works. If that's not too confusing,
No,
sorry.
So bring back with those changes
Those changes.
incorporated.
Yep.
We don't need if we're not gonna vote on anything, we don't need a motion.
If we all agree on changes, we can just direct staff to do so.
Oh, okay,
I agree.
fair enough.
We're all good with that? Perfect.
And then we bring it back for adoption at a
Yes.
future meeting as we have to have it.
Sounds
get
good.
Published for 10 days.
And Counselor Nichols, on your point on the policy, did you want to discuss that now, or
I kind of feel like the ordinance and the policy should be,
aligned?
the policy shouldn't put greater restrictions than the ordinance does. If we believe that it should be something, it should be in the ordinance.
Yeah.
Maybe have a policy on how you enforce and what you do with storage and notification and all that kind of thing. But I feel like there shouldn't be a greater restriction in the policy than we've put into the
Yeah.
code.
I would agree. Trying to think of, do we set something on a future agenda to discuss maybe a more in-depth policy, or I'm not quite sure.
Or would you like us to bring this back for discussion at further discussion with the policy again? I mean, we could do,
Yeah,
either have it separate or we could tie it to the
let's
ordinance.
tie
which
all
would be-
together. Yeah, that'd be great.
Okay.
Perfect. Okay. Then, if I can find my right paper, we will move on to new business. We have another public comment opportunity for our large crowd, and for 10A and B.
Perfect. Thank you, Mayor. No, we don't have any public comment cards, and unfortunately, no one in the audience, but anyone listening online, we do still have several people joining us
Sounds good.
virtually. If you do want to speak for the public comment period related to new business, which is 10A and B, you can do so by pressing *9 to raise your hand if you're on a phone, or you can press the reactions button and raise your hand. We'll recognize you. This time, no one has popped up a hand to talk.
All right, then we'll go on to 10A, which is the city park water connection.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Unfortunately, we had the one well that we use in the city park has failed. And it's a fairly important piece both for maintenance and even rec activities that are down there. And so staff investigated several options. One was to continue to repair the old long-term underperforming well, and we don't believe that's a viable option. We also investigated drilling a new well, and just, it exceeded $50,000, which kind of blew us away, but primarily due to material prices, and it's a challenge in this marketplace. And then another option was to connect a municipal sewer and water, or municipal sewer, municipal water. And we did get some quotes, and the low bidder is attached at $10,000, and then we do have a $1,300 connection fee to Maple Grove. Or the fourth option is to do nothing, and the concern with that is we don't have an unknown timeline for when the city park improvements might be made. The park building, warming house, utilizes that water, so we'd have some concerns about usability. And again, it does have a fairly significant impact to park maintenance and recreation activities. So we don't really feel like doing nothing is an option. So the lowest cost alternative that we feel that we can reuse in the future is why we're recommending you approve us to move forward with that connection to sewer or to water. And then Mayor McKee requested that Brad look into the use of ARPA funds, and that appears to be an eligible use of those funds if we want to allocate that or kind of placehold to allocate that for a future decision. Otherwise, it would be an expense that we didn't plan for and likely absorbed through the 2020 budget. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
I just want to make sure I had the right understanding of it. Long term, so whenever the master planning for the actual park improvements happen, we'd be able to use both a new well in the future and the city connection, because I know some of the concern that Brad brought up with me was obviously we wouldn't want to be doing irrigation with the city water connection for that whole new facility long term. So you think we'd be able to use both a new well in the future and the city water connection?
Yeah, I think we could utilize that for sure, based on the site layout. It's a bit unknown, but we don't,
Right.
anytime you make a connection, we're making sure it's a 4-inch connection and gives us, it's not just a drinking fountain connection. So we believe we can use it in some capacity in the future. More than likely, there will be a well constructed in the future. The placement of that well, the size of that well, the need for the well, the capacity for that well might change depending on our plans.
Right.
So rather than invest 5 times that without having a known, we just feel like we took it into consideration. We just don't feel like it's a wise use of money based on what we know today.
Makes sense. Appreciate it.
So you think we'll have a well here at some point?
I mean, there's an option for it as a backup to a stormwater management component. When we add impervious and whatnot, we'll have to create a stormwater management plan, and a lot of times reuse is a part of that, and then that's a well might back up the reuse instead of using processed water.
Oh, okay.
So it likely, the size of that complex ultimately, it likely will be a combination of everything and additional connections at larger buildings, but we just don't feel like doing nothing is an option, and even limping it along. We've probably had 6 failures of this well over the last decade, and every time we do that, it's a couple $1,000 to $5,000, and this was a fairly severe failure, and we just, even to fix it this time, it's probably $20,000. So we just feel like it's not a wise investment, so. Hands are tied if we don't do anything. This is the cost-effective approach that we feel makes sense, or it's just do nothing, and that really impacts other things, probably at a cost of more than $10,000 over the course of 2 or 3 years plus, so.
Makes sense.
It's a good long-term investment. We want to connect at some point anyway.
Thanks, Kevin.
Yeah, thank you.
So we'd be hooking up the warming house and the water fountains out there? Drinking water.
We have one water fountain over by Meister Field.
Right.
Because it was isolated. It would basically be hooking up the warming house. So when we did the
Okay.
downtown sewer and water project, we actually ran a hydrant over there as part of that project. You'll see it off of 50, and that was to help with some of the flooding, and it helps us pull water, which helps us improve water quality in our system. So we kind of extended that 4 or 5 years ago with the anticipation of sometime connecting potentially. So that's why we have a shorter connection. We're basically going from that hydrant to the building. So
Okay.
it was kind of a plan, and then we're trying to hold off, and the domino fell where we're like, this is the most cost-effective solution.
So we're all good with the
Yeah.
going forward? All right.
I think.
How about the rescue plan? Would it be helpful for us to distinguish that now, or?
Yeah, I think we certainly could, if you, as part of moving forward with it, let us know that you'd like to utilize the ARPA funds, that'd be great.
So what are your guys' thoughts on that, using
Is there any
the,
reason not to?
no, not really.
Other people's money, right?
I mean,
Well,
well, I think we'll find a use one way or the
We
other
could use it
for
in
it,
another
right.
area.
Yeah.
Yes.
But I think we certainly don't have it all earmarked for.
I don't
It's our money.
have it all earmarked. Right
It's
now,
nice.
the
like
items that
that.
we were proposing were some additional,
Use it or lose it
moving
too,
things
isn't it?
paperless.
but we have like 3 years.
As well as cybersecurity
Yeah.
and a few other infrastructure,
Yep.
potentially the connection here. So I think
There's
we'll
some wiggle
find,
room, yeah.
we'll find ways to utilize those.
Perfect.
I guess one question I had, if the well cost is 50,000 because of materials issues, does that raise any concerns with the water planning? And if, I'm assuming we're gonna use the same kinds of materials for, the water tower and treatment plant and stuff like that. Is that already factored into the plans that you're making, or is this like a wake-up call, like it's higher than we expected?
Great question. If you recall, we had the initial feasibility, and then we went back and supplemented it, and the price, we kind of revisited all that over 24 months, and then we went back, and one of the 4 main things was contingency due to market conditions. So we have taken a best guess at incorporating that. So that's when it went from 7 million to 14 million. Part of that additional was an attempted placeholder on
Okay.
some less market volatility. Hopefully we get it right. It's a 3-year project. We can't control what happens in 2 years, but we took a step at that before we move forward.
Okay. But this isn't out of line with what your worst-case plan was?
I mean, it's a lot of money for a well, but we're hoping it kind of catches up by 2 years. So I mean, we have, I don't know, $1 million or $2 million of just contingency in that project for some of us. So
Okay.
we'll continue to update you as you go if we feel like that's not going to be achieved. I guess
Okay.
that's my honest answer. We don't know what it's going to be when we go to bid it, but, if we bid a project, we design it, we bid it, if the prices are just extreme, we can always not award the bid, wait 6 months, or whatever. We have those options until we actually execute the contract, so I think it's a great question to be aware of. We tried to plan for it. We'll know more when we go to bid it out if we were accurate or not.
Okay. Thanks, Kevin.
Okay. If there's nothing else, I'll go ahead and entertain a motion to authorize staff to initiate project to connect City Park to the municipal water system in the amount of $11,360 and add the ARPA, our rescue plan fund, use for that.
So moved.
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All right, 10B, schedule work session for water supply planning.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. At the September 9th meeting, you authorized preliminary design of the Northeast Water Supply Project, and we'd like to propose a work session on October 28th to discuss the type and location of water storage with you folks. Just gonna see if that is a date that would work. If
That
not,
work for everyone?
I put it on my calendar already while you guys were talking about something.
Good deal. You're ahead of the curve. Let me double check it. Yeah, looks like it works for me. Work for you, Dean?
Yep, we're good.
Perfect. So do you need me to call that now?
just
Jeremy,
call
we
that
don't
up.
care.
Go ahead and call the
I did not already.
work session
Blow
for
right by.
water supply planning on October 28th at 5:30. All right, now we're going on to a closed session, and I have a novel to read here. All right, so under the authority of Minnesota Statute 13D.05 subdivision 3B, the city is permitted to close a meeting for attorney-client privilege to discuss pending litigation. The city council is going into closed session for that purpose to discuss a response related to the Keytown action filed by Stephen Keebler against Nelson Auto Center. Upon adjournment of that closed session, the city council will enter into a second closed session pursuant to the authority granted under Minnesota statute 13D.05 subdivision 3C3 in order to develop and consider an offer for the purchase of real property. Specifically, the city council will discuss a proposed purchase of easement or fee simple interest affecting the following properties. And it is 10 properties, including PID number 36-119-23-23-008, 36-119-23-23-003, 36-119-23-23-007, 36-119-23-32-003, 36-119-23-32-0010, 36-119-23-32-0015, 36-119-23-32-0014, 36-119-23-32-0011, 36-119-23-32-0012, 36-119-23-32-0013.
Must see TV, right?
Clearly. All right.
Thank you. We'll go ahead and recess.
Recording stopped.
I gotta say all that again.